Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review They from 2002. So, one thing that I feel that I need to get started to state before I go on and go into this review is I feel that Darkness Falls and They could really be compared to one another, but I also feel that Darkness Falls just does a little bit better job at what it does than They does. Whereas throughout most of the They film, I was consistently comparing this movie to Darkness Falls and just stating that, like, okay, Darkness Falls just does this better, this is better, this is... And so, like, it just kept going on uh, with me just kind of feeling that way. But so, I can also state that They does have some good points, and so I'm going to go on and try to mention them here. So, They has a really good intro because, of course, every horror movie I think should actually start out with a kid being terrified of the dark or any kind of other thing that is to be uh, the conflict of this film. And so I liked the intro of the film, but then what also kind of bothered me about it is we've come to find out in the cast list that it seems that the young kid is to be a younger version of a character that we see later in the film. And I was like, wait a minute, like, was there a scene I missed? Was there something that I, of course, was to be oblivious to? Like, the way of which of the young kid's scene ending and us seeing the other character who is to be much older now, I was like, wait a minute, like, what? But so, but that kind of tweaked into my brain. But so, going further on in this film, we have a movie where we are trying to have our characters stay within the light, to where it also seems that on the villain side of things, they are trying to conflict with that, trying to come up with ways to neutralize the light, or to conflict with electricity, trying to go on and nullify things like when Sam in some part of the film was to be lighting a bunch of candles within this room, we all of a sudden have this sprinkler system that comes on to neutralize the candles. And so that I thought was really interesting about this movie, how we have, like, hey, stay within the light, but we also have on the villain side of things, we have them trying to stay. It's like, well, like, state that it's like, well, you can try to stay in the light, but how long can you before you have to kind of bounce from thing to thing to thing to try and stay alive? So it's always this act of how are these people going to continue to go on and stay alive here. It's always them needing to be playing this balancing act. So, with that said, I, of course, was to go on, and I enjoy this movie. I like the fact that we end up having this kind of more kid element that is to be brought back as a reoccurring or a lapse as far as a number of these 20 or 30 something adults are to realize that they are getting night terrors again to remind them about being children. And so I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. That's a cool way to work this in. Plus, also something that was, I guess, supposed to grab them as children when it never could. It was to come after them again as more adults, leaving some unusual mark to then tell them that they're going to be next. And so, with that said, I went on and enjoyed this movie, even though also it seems that the main character is to be too overpowering as far as this to be possibly an ensemble film. Because, of course, we go on to have characters like Terry and Sam that I feel that I wanted more in this film, and we didn't. But then we go right back to the overly needy Julia that I honestly don't like as much, which she's the main character, and so really I'm like, yeah, like you kind of focused on the wrong person. But so going into this film a little bit more, um, we of course are to have certain scenes that are to try to get Julia as much declothed as humanly possible, but then also like we're kind of teasing a lot of that. We're trying to have this one flash of her being declothed, and then we kind of look away from it, and it's like, oh, like they gave us something, but then they really just gave us a flash of something, a side of a butt or a flash of a chest or whatever, and it's like, really, you can't go on and just kind of like, if you're gonna do it, do it. If you aren't gonna like really be able to fully do it, then don't do it at all. It's just stupid. But so going into this film, I think that's all that I really have to say about this film. And so, really, with that said, I think it's about that time to just go on into spoilers because I feel like I've kind of teed this up in a way. I think the only thing that I have left to say is we also have Julia's character who is to be this psychologist. And so she even at some points is to rationalize to herself what, of course, she is conflicted with or dealing with, and I thought that that was kind of fascinating to see it from like a logical side of things, instead of just going on and just stating like, okay, this person has a fear, and so like this person has to deal with this fear no matter what. But it's like, oh no, like there's probably a whole reasoning, or there's probably a whole kind of rational approach to this. That is to say, it's like, well, this person is just kind of dealing with this fear now because, of course, of a trauma moment or a tragic moment of her friend dying, and that is to manifest into what is really going on now. And so Julia is to just need some time to grieve or process this, and then maybe she will work over it or be able to get through it. And so that is the thing that I kind of like about this movie is it kind of approaches it from unique ways or interesting like angles. And so with that said, let's go on and let's go into that double five time territory because about that time yet again to go into spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. The grading of this movie is at the end of the day, they is okay. It's an okay film. I would say that it's more interesting than okay, but uh, it may be something that you may want to go on and check out and see. Where can you go on and see this movie for absolutely free? Hopefully, you can go on into an app called Doxy, Doxcy. Hopefully, this is still available on a Google Play Store. If not, you can go on to searching the words movie app and hopefully dare in fact be able to find a app equivalent for you to be able to watch this movie for absolutely free. You can also go on into a Google Play Store search and search the words Play UHD. So that's two words, Play UHD. You will go on and find an app that says Fox HD Movies on the logo. Go ahead and download this, and you should be able to go out of your way to hopefully say that you can see they upon this app. Or if not, you can also go on to a app called 123 Movies, which is also available on your Google Play Store. Of course, this app at some point has like a plethora of different kind of variations of it, and so at some points the app may not work as far as like certain versions. You may not get content, or you may not get servers to work. If not, like I would just keep cycling through to find the right app that'll work for you. And then next you can go on and probably go into a Google search because I don't think the Yes Movies app that works on the Google Play Store is all that great. I would go through a Google search to search the word Yes Movies. Hopefully, going on, downloading this, being able to say that you can see they and a number of other things for absolutely free. Go ahead and check all these things out. But without a doubt, I think that's about all that I have to say. about apps, but I think it's here in fact time to just go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time you spoil this movie. Let's go into it. So, in the very beginning of this film, we of course have a young Billy who is with his mother Mary, and so Billy is stating that he wants to go on and sleep with his mother because, of course, he is still afraid of the dark. And so Mary is to go on and tell Billy, it's like, no, like, come on, like, you need to get through this, like, you need to conquer your fears, so on and so forth, or that this kid just needs to figure out a way to just fall asleep. So Mary is to go on and tell Billy, it's like, well, hey, if you go on and if you just are underneath the covers, you should be fine. You should be fine, Billy. So Billy, of course, is to go on and listen to his mother, and so she ends up leaving the room, and of course, we go on to have Billy's closet, who is still to be opened. And I'm like, that's your first mistake. Should have gone on and, like, the mother, or, like, both Billy and the mom should have, like, closed the closets and done everything to make sure that this kid is to not have at any point seemed to be scared about something. So should have closed the closet, obviously. But so we have Billy's closet, who seems to be open, and things seem to be moving around in there. To the point, of course, Billy now being very concerned. He's screaming and he's calling for his mother, and so on and so forth. And so Billy is to just toss his head underneath these sheets with this flashlight on, hoping that at some point he's going to go on and just weather the storm of this boogerish man. And so it seems, while Billy is underneath his bed with the flashlight on, all of a sudden the flashlight starts to flicker. And so Billy is realizing that he is basically effed. Billy is, for lack of a better term, he's kind of in a bad way here. So all of a sudden, we finally have Billy that is just like, maybe I could just go back, maybe I should just go to sleep, maybe it'll all work out. But when Billy is to go on to, of course, try to see if the monster is still there, he then goes on and gets dragged under his bed and taken. And so I'm like, wait a minute, so we have an older version of Billy that ends up being shown in this film. So what happened between the time that Billy was taken to him now being here talking to Julia's character? Where is the scene there? Did the kid escape somehow? Did he figure out a way to escape? I'm confused. But anyways, pushing on. So we then shift over to Julia. So Julia, of course, is to have gone on and done a workout, or obviously went jogging or something. It seems that she's wearing some kind of athletic gear, because, of course, knowing very well what that looks like. So we have Julia, who's going on and having an answering machine, which that seems like a fairly dated thing. And so, like, Julia immediately comes off like Catwoman from Batman Returns. That kind of feels how, like, dated this movie is. But so we have Julia's going on and hearing all her messages, and we of course have her boyfriend, who is to be Paul, who is to state that the both of them should go on to go out and get drinks and just have fun. And Julia is saying, like, well, like, I really have to study, like, I don't think that that's going to happen. And immediately the next message is Paul going on and saying, like, don't say that you have to study. Like, I know that's the thing that you were going to say. So, like, no. Like, we're going to go on and we're going to go out. And so, like, everything's going to work out. And so let's go on and go out and just get drunk for once. So we have both Julia and Paul, who end up having a good night out to the point where they head back home to think that Paul and Julia are finally going to get lucky or get busy. And we all of a sudden are to instead have Julia get a call from Billy, who, of course, is to want to talk to Julia because they are old friends. And so we immediately have Julia that wants to go and seek out Billy to talk to him at some diner, and Paul is to try to convince Julia to not go out because it's like, well, hey, you know how this guy is to just be desperately seeking attention, and so on and so forth. But Julia's like, no, I'm just gonna go out and I'm just gonna hear him out. Like, I just want to talk to him, because Paul is to just rationally think that this guy is just crazy, but we just have consistently Julia that's willing to enable him for whatever crazy that he has for today. So Julia makes her way to go on to this diner to meet up with Billy, where Billy is to go on and state about they and how they mess with electricity and how, like, he's basically telling her the whole strategy guide of how to avoid this thing. And it seems that Billy was to have gone on to work nights so he can sleep during the day so he could always be like protected by the daylight. So it seems Billy is talking to Julia and giving her a guide of what not and not to do, as if Billy is to realize that this girl is going to be next. And so Billy is to also mention, I think, at some point that everybody at some point is going to get marked. And, or if Billy doesn't mention it, it seems that Sam definitely does within the part of this film. So Billy, who has gone on and consistently been so frightened by this thing that has come after him, that had tried to come after him before when he was a kid and had frightened him, we then turn around and have Billy, who is to go on and be so terrified as what is to come next that he is to finally take his own life by putting a gun to his head and killing himself off here. So that, of course, leads then, because of that event, we then have Julia, who is to start to go on and have night terrors, as Julia is to uh, be sleeping and dreaming that she is making her way to this bathroom where she is to open up this medicine cabinet and all of a sudden have this kind of black like goop that she is to put her hands in, and all of a sudden her hands are like breaking and snapping and whatever, and to all of a sudden have that terrified Julia, but then all of a sudden Paul ends up coming into the room to try and shake Julia out of whatever she's dealing with, and Julia almost goes on and is to like attack her boyfriend. Where Paul is like, "Wait a minute, whoa, 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 whoa!" And so Julia's like, "How did I get here? Like, how did this happen?" And Paul is like, "I don't know. Like, I just came in here and you were here. I don't get it." So Julia ends up going on to Billy's funeral to then come to the wake. And so there, of course, she then meets up with both Sam and Terry, who Sam, of course, is glad that it seems that Julia is to be a girl that is their age, because there's a bunch of people that have probably just been alive since 1950 here. So we, of course, have Julia, who is talking to these two people, and uh, it seems that at some point we, of course, would have Billy, who is to go on and take Prozac, and Sam was to make this joke of like, well, I guess it didn't work. And so they were trying to go on and trying to like re-figure out where it is that had went wrong with Billy, as they were trying to backpedal and like have Julia state what Billy was saying before and how it seemed very unrational. So after Julia is to go on and go to this funeral and talk to these people, and it seems that there may go on and at some point be a connection there. So Julia is to then turn around and get in her car and drive. And what ends up happening is it seems that while Julia is driving, it seems that a part of her car or high beams are starting to no longer work, and all of a sudden Julia is to seem to run over something that she doesn't quite know exactly what it was. And so, come to find out, Julia is to try to go on to figure out what she had hit, is to try to go on and go back into her car, and all of a sudden, this spirit of Billy is to scare the crap out of her, and then she goes on to have her car come back on again, and all of a sudden, bizarrely, her car just works, so that way she can drive off. So Julia immediately goes to Paul, and Paul, of course, is to be drinking with his best friends. And we have Julia who pulls Paul aside to explain to him that she, of course, was in this car accident, and Julia wants some kind of comfort from Paul because she was almost in a car accident and she didn't die. She didn't know what she ran over, and so on and so forth. And Paul is to finally go on and say to Julia, it's like, well, hey, like, not all of us is to have like the easiest time. And so Paul goes on and explains that, of course, he, for his work, was to be dealing with a car pileup and how he had to go on and start chopping up bodies to try and get them all to like kind of get through this car pileup. And Paul had gone on and done and dealt with something much worse than he had, and so he's like, well, hey, like, everything that is wrong with you is in here, where everything that I'm dealing with is out here. Like, I'm out here. And so, like, maybe you should go on and see somebody and try to, like, work through this. So we then go on and have Julia, who is again both talking to Sam and Terry, as Sam and Terry are to now state that it seems that after Billy had passed away, it seems that now both Sam and Terry are starting to have nightmares again, or night terrors. Terry is to mention this story about her going on and her having such a bad dream that when her parents were trying to go on and find her, they could not find her in the whole entire house. Somehow, mysteriously, Terry had gone on to sleepwalk, and when at some point the parents were to go on and look in every possible way to find their kid, they even went as far as going into the doghouse to try and find their child. When Terry's mother was to finally, or when Terry's father was to finally look into this doghouse to find Terry, Terry ended up taking this kitchen knife to her father's eye and killing him. I'm assuming, because that isn't clear in the story, but I would have to naturally assume a knife to the eye would probably kill somebody. So Terry is to say this story here because she, of course, is to go right back to that horrified moment and be revisiting it currently, to where Sam doesn't have his own story, but it feels like he's having the same problem. So both Terry and Sam are asking Julia if she's kind of facing that, and she doesn't really admit to it, but she's hearing out these people's stories. So Julia goes on to meet up with a therapist of her past, who, of course, is to be Dr. Booth. It seems that Dr. Booth is to just be like a kind of like a pediatrician where he only goes on and sees kids. And so we have Dr. Booth who's just like, well, normally I don't see adults, but like since we have a history together, I'll hear you out. And so Julia is to come to Dr. Booth and state that she has a relapse of night terrors. And so Dr. Booth is just like, okay, all right, like, well, you did have that as a kid, even to the point of Julia having this this VHS tape that is to go on and like showcase how terrified she was as a kid, and so on and so forth. So Dr. Booth is trying to go on and say it's like, well, like, I'll take your case on, but like, I don't know if I can reasonably help you, just because, again, I don't deal with adults. And so we have Terry and we have Sam. Sam, it seems, is unusually uh, painting with black paint to just continue to just like paint this image over and over. It's just black on black, and like that's all it is. Like at first, we end up seeing that Sam is just drawing this window. I'm like, what is it, like a window to the soul or something like that he's drawing? But like it just continues to just be this like this black image that doesn't make any sense. And so we have both Sam and Terry that are together, and it seems that Sam is realizing that Terry is to have this leg wound, and she continues to keep picking at it. And Sam is going to go on and tell her, it's like, well, hey, like, don't continue to pick on that, or it's never going to heal. And so this wound seems very unusual, and like I was of course like, okay, like is this going to be the mark that we're going to see on every single one of these? And comes to find out that is to be the case, because we even have at one point where Sam is to like pull down his shirt and reveal that he has a mark on his chest later on, to tell Julia that everyone is going to have this mark at some point before they end up getting killed. So we have Terry that goes on to uh, her pool. She has a pool, I'm assuming, either in this apartment complex or just somewhere nearby. And so Terry's going on, getting into her bathing suit, making her way into this pool where she is to try and go on and do laps. So the only one person who is to be left in this pool swimming next to her leaves. And so Terry is to be by herself. All of a sudden, we then go on to have the pool slowly but surely start to turn off all of its lights, to where Terry, of course, like, hey, like, can somebody turn the lights back on? So no one does. Just numerous lights continue to just be turned off consistently. So Terry is to realize that something is with her within this pool, and it is to possibly not be another person, it is to be something else. We also had a moment in this movie where Terry was to think that she heard something in this ventilation shaft, and so she opens it thinking that some mouse had been caught in this rat trap, but come to find out that wouldn't be the case. When Terry is consistently trying to hit this lighter, the they entity tries to get closer and closer to her. By the time that Terry finally does hit this lighter and have this light come on, they ends up kind of running off back into the shadows, realizing that it is getting hit with this light and it doesn't like it. And so the rat, of course, does not go on and like attack this woman either. But anyways, so Terry then goes on to have at some point where she is to try to jump out of this pool as quickly as she can, to then try to run off back to her locker room to desperately plead for anyone to hear her out. You would honestly think that there would be some kind of like lifeguard or something like nearby a pool, or maybe you would just have cameras or something like that kind of covering what exactly happened, because what if somebody dies? But anyways, so we have at some point where, of course, Terry is to be taken by they, and now she is, of course, killed. She is taken. So now we are to go on and have Julia, who is supposed to get to her exam, her psychology exam, so she can finally become a psychologist. And so supposedly Paul is to state to uh, Julia before, it's like, man, you got this. This is a slam dunk. You're going to easily pass this. Come to find out, by the time that Julia goes to have both Professor Crowley and Professor Atkins go on and do this exam, it seems that Julia is very scatterbrained, to where it seems when Julia is trying to go on and try to assess or try to figure out or answer any of these things for these examiners, she's kind of thumbing through these papers and she's like, and so Julia, of course, is to miserably fail this exam because she, of course, is to be so rattled by other things besides what is really going on here, which is just this exam, or really her being just so stressed out. Because of course Dr. Booth was to go on and tell her, it's like, well, maybe you're just stressed. Like maybe it's stress plus the trauma of the events of a friend of yours like killing themselves right in front of you. Like all of that adding up could deal with your delusion or whatever you're having right now. So we now have Terry, who has gone on and she has been taken, Liam Neeson style. No. So now we, of course, have Julia and Sam. And so Sam, of course, is to ask Julia, it's like, well, hey, have you seen Terry? Because Terry somehow has like disappeared, and like if she was to have gone on and disappeared, she would have just ran from wherever she was with just her swimsuit on, because people were to find her locker with clothes in it, and so none of this is adding up. None of this makes sense. And so Sam is to go on and decipher some of Billy's notes, as it seems that Julia and Sam and Terry were to make their way into Billy's room to find this notebook full of paper and all these other uh, kind of unusual things, like this big, huge kind of sculpture of sorts that might have been a thing to try and prevent this monster from getting close to Billy. Or maybe he has a number of like dream catchers or whatever, like anything trying to go on and and uh, get from this thing trying to get to Billy. But so Sam is talking to Julia, and Sam was to have noticed the mark that Terry had, and now Sam has it. And at some point, Sam is wanting to go on and think that Julia might have one next. We also had Dr. Booth, who was to like ask when he was talking to Julia, it's like, well, hey, like if everyone else has a mark, like why don't you? And so Julia goes on with Paul to like strip search herself, where she's just wearing underwear, to have Paul look for the mark, and he can't find it anywhere. But come to find out, we will have uh, Julia that does get a mark, but not right away. So we now have Sam who is painting away. Painting away, of course. And so Sam has a number of candles, like I think I was to state earlier, that are to all get snuffed out by this sprinkler system. And so it seems Sam is to start to possibly realize that the thing that he is so worried about is coming after him. As Sam is to continue on to paint this blackened creature within this painting, and he's trying to figure it out what this thing that he's drawing really is. And so it's going to come after him. So Sam, it seems, is to realize that darkness is starting to creep into the room of which that he is in. Sam is desperately trying to figure out some way to get out of his apartment, even to the point of him going on and trying to yell the word somebody. Somebody! To try to make somebody aware of his problem. So, which I thought was so goofy. So, Sam ends up trying to bang his window to try to get the attention of his neighbor, which he doesn't. So Sam then turns around and breaks his window to just try to get the F out of there. And that is to go on and just have him fail at trying to figure out a way out of here. So instead, Sam runs to his elevator, where, of course, it seems the elevator is malfunctioning to where the elevator is to be usually half in, half out. So when Sam tries to go on and slide out of his elevator, hoping he's going to run out of this place to get free, all of a sudden they comes after him to drag him underneath this elevator and take him and kill him off here. So we, of course, finally go on at some point to have Julia that is going to her therapist. And that's finally when Dr. Booth is to tell Julia, it's like, well, like, Julia, you're a psychologist. Like, you will be one soon. Like, I have all the belief in you that you're going to become a great psychologist. But you know what? I think that you should finally go on and, like, analyze yourself. Like, figure out what your problems are and understand what the solution is. Because Julia is to go on and see this little girl called Sarah. And we have Julia who's asking Sarah why she's here. And it seems that Sarah is dealing with the exact same problem that Julia has, because Sarah is to state that she has night terrors because of about the characters that are, of course, to be called they. You know, they. And so both of them are dealing with the same thing here. And so Julia then goes on to speak with her doctor. And then finally the doctor is like, okay, like, analyze yourself right now. Come up with your own problem. Like, I could do that. I can get paid to. But, like, how about you go on, you analyze what's going on here. And so Julia is starting to analyze herself, and boom, the answer is to be there, right within Julia's brain. And Dr. Booth is like, well, yeah, like, go on and realize and rationalize that, like, you're dealing with all of this because of stress or simply because of a death of a number of people. And so just kind of like, just go home and, like, just get some rest and hope that at some point this is all just going to go away, because this guy isn't going to give you any medication. He's not going to tell you to go to the loony bin. Nothing. So we then, of course, have Julia that is to go on to go into her place and realize that this closet is open. And Julia's like, man, like, all I'm thinking about is so irrational right now. It's so childish. What am I doing? So Julia just goes right into this closet, opens up this closet with all of his clothes, and then there's a monster right then and there. And Julia is like, oh my god! So Julie is now running like crazy to then make her way to her boyfriend Paul to try to explain all of her irrational behavior, because Julia is to be running from this thing, making her way to this Chinese restaurant where she is to go into this bathroom, into the sink, and pull this thing from out of her brain, this very unusual splinter, and is to drop it into the sink. And now she is going on to Paul, telling him what had happened, that this thing is chasing after her, that she was to go on and pull out the splinter from out of her brain, as if this thing had been like uh, like put into her like long before, and now she is to finally notice it, because these things are after her, yada yada yada. So more and more, Paul is to really hear Julia out and be like, you sound crazy. You sound crazy. Like, this does not sound right. So no one is really going to believe Julia, so it just gets down to the point where this thing is just going to continue to come after her. So Julia then goes on to continue to find a place where she can hope that there is consistent light. Because, of course, Julia is to try to seek the comfort of her boyfriend, to have Paul just turn around and drug her with sleeping medication. And so, because if I guess is not getting laid, then he's going to try to put this girl to sleep. Because, of course, we get a moment where both Paul and Julia were sleeping together before, and Julia tries to get out of the bed, and all of a sudden, one of his friends comes in unannounced, without knocking on a door, to just be like, hey, and then he's like, whoa. And so we go on to have that kind of moment here. But so Julie, who feels very betrayed by her boyfriend Paul, it's like, hey, you just gave me something to sleep. And so Julie is like, I can't sleep. Even at one point, she was to try to stay up all night to like study on things and tell her friend to kind of like, hey, like, uh, can you call me later to make sure that I'm awake? But so Julia goes to the subway station where she feels that that might be a good source of light. And so Julia is to go onto the side of the subway station to start barfing out this sleep medication, hoping that she'll stay awake then. But all of a sudden, we have this subway station that is starting to lose its lighting, as if electricity is going to start to turn off in the subway station. So Julia then goes on to chase after a train that it seems to have light. Or Julia is to chase after this train that seems to have some lighting, and so Julia is chasing after that, so that way she can try to avoid having the booger man or the monsterish thing come after her. So we even get at one point where Julia is to see this uh, this part of light that is to be put on in this track that she huddles next to, that is glowing green, and she's like huddled next to that, hoping that this is going to keep her alive long enough. All of a sudden, the next thing we end up seeing is a number of these construction workers all trying to get to Julia, finding out where she is, and Julia is to think that this is the monstrous being instead of these construction workers, and so she starts attacking them without realizing who they really are. And so, and plus this girl being so close to being half awake, half asleep because of possibly the drugs, we then, of course, go on to the next thing we see because Julia had gone on and attacked people. We see Julia in this mental hospital where she, of course, is being treated. We have both Paul and we have both Julia, or we have both Paul and we have both Dr. Booth, who um, are to kind of go on and see over Julia as it's like, well, uh, like it seems such a shame that this girl had turned out this way, yada yada yada. So Julia, of course, is in this mental hospital, and we have at one point where Julia is to stick her head out, or to kind of put her head next to this door, and we have a moment where they breaks through this glass to get to Julia. Because come to find out, they finally goes on to grab Julia and put her through this closet to where now she's on the other side, and it's only just a matter of time before the they monsters comes in and consumes her whenever they get hungry. So Julia is now on the other side of things when Dr. Booth and this orderly comes in to be like, oh my god, how did she get out of here? Like, how did she get out of a locked room? And they're like, we don't know. So Julia is on the other side of this space and going on and trying to bang against this kind of force field to try and tell these people that she is on this other side. And so Julia ends up getting grabbed and killed by a number of these day monsters. So that is the way that this movie just kind of plays out. That is the ending of it. So we never legitimately see what the they thing is. Like, we see little bits and flashes of it, but we never really see much of anything, or we never see anything close enough. But it is what it is. So with that said, I think I'm just going to go on and get out of here. I apologize, but by the way, I was kind of wording things by the end of this. But either way, go ahead and see day. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody.